All right, for Proverbs 24. I put verses 3 and 4 up on the slide just as an introduction, because a lot of this chapter has to do with preparing for the future, and it uses this metaphor of a house in several of the Proverbs in here. And it is both literal and a metaphor, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yep.
So in verse 1, do not envy evil people or desire to be with them, for their hearts contemplate violence and their lips speak mischief. By wisdom a house is built, by understanding it is prepared, and by knowledge its rooms are filled with every rare and pleasing treasure. A wise man is strong, and a man of knowledge becomes even stronger. For with wise advice you wage war, and in many counselors there is victory. Wisdom is unattainable for a fool, he does not open his mouth at the gate. One who plots evil will be called a schemer. A foolish scheme is sin, and people detest a mocker. I just realized I'm on the Tree of Life version. I usually read the ESV. Let me switch back just for consistency. The devising of folly is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to mankind. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? My son, eat honey, for it is good, and the drippings of the honeycomb are sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is such to your soul. If you find it, there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Lie not in wait as a wicked man against the dwelling of the righteous. Do no violence to his home. For the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him. Fret not yourself because of evildoers, and be not envious of the wicked, for the evil man has no future. The lamp of the wicked will be put out. My son, fear the Lord and the king, and do not join with those who do otherwise, for disaster will arise suddenly from them, and who knows the ruin that will come from them both. These also are sayings of the wise. Partiality in judgment is not good. Whoever says to the wicked, you are in the right, will be cursed by peoples, abhorred by nations. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. Whoever gives an honest answer kisses the lips. Prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house. Be not a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Do not say, I will do to him as he has done to me. I will pay the man back for what he has done. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. All right, lots of good advice. And some of these are going to sound familiar. Don't be envious of evil men. It says, whoever plans evil will be called a schemer. Don't rejoice when your enemy falls. The evil man has no future. These are all things that we've heard before in different words or with a different emphasis. But I want to hear your thoughts. Start at the beginning. And what do you think of Proverbs 24? I especially like they're all good, of course. But we'll just start with verse 1. Be not envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their hearts devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble. Any stories from personal experience on why it's a bad idea to be envious of evil men and want to hang around with them? I know that there are lots of real life stories out there. I just don't know. Maybe you have them.
I don't have any.
You never hung around with anybody bad.
Well, we both know that I did. But
I don't know, Jay, you're kind of bad.
Yep. I had when I was in tech school in the Air Force, I can't remember what they called them. In tech school, they kind of mock up your unit to act like a real world unit. And, one of your peers is kind of like your lieutenant. I think he was called the flight commander. and he was in the room right next to mine, and he called me Evil Jay for the whole time. And I don't know how that started.
That's funny.
Yeah, that is.
Could have been further from the truth.
Yeah,
Or were you
maybe
evil? Or
that's
were you
why,
evil
'cause-
at the time?
Well, I was certainly more of a little more obnoxious and arrogant.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not evil. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, though. You really have to define evil, right?
That's
We
right.
can all agree Hitler's evil, right? Don't be envious of Hitler. Well, that makes sense. But at what gradient does that evil just become not evil, but not a good person?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
I think that we can ask the question, like, what does doing evil look like? And where there are people consistently doing evil, we can definitely think those people are evil. I think about things like people like that I think of that would be evil might be Bill Gates or what's his name? The doctor.
Dahmer?
Fauci. Yeah, Dr.
Fauci.
Homer.
Dr. Fauci, like those people know what they're doing. They're not like, oh, we just didn't know what was happening, or we were doing this for humanity, or the things they're doing are pretty wicked.
Mhm.
Okay, so
And they make-
I'd stop you there, Paula. I would say there are people that have that understanding or have that opinion, but there are also people that are choosing not to appropriate that to those individuals, and they would not define them as evil.
Yeah, I think that from a biblical standpoint, that we could demonstrate some things that these people are doing, have done, that just really go against just the nature of being free people, biblically speaking.
Mhm.
Like not wanting people to have freedom
Mhm.
and working against that. So, I mean, obviously, it when you define evil, it has to come back to the standards of God and how He defines things. You know, what somebody else considers evil because their definition is not based on what the Creator says evil is. That's,
Mhm.
that's a whole different
Cool.
story.
Well,
Yeah,
what
I
would
mean-
cause you to be envious of evil people, to want to be with them?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know what would. There's money in many cases,
Mhm.
like, like people thinking about like, oh, Bill Gates has a lot of money or Fauci has a lot of money now. I think that a lot of times what people have, more covetous kind of perspective, it might not be specifically money, but it might be other things. But I think that's very likely to be part of it.
Mhm.
Copycat mass murderers. That's a thing, right? And
Mhm.
why are they doing it? Well, because so and so did it and I can do it better, or they got notoriety and I can get more notoriety, or somehow they, in a twisted way, elevate that person's actions as to something to strive for or beat, or so that's a pretty blatant example.
Mhm.
It says their hearts devise violence. Well,
Mhm.
that's specifically violence that's being perpetrated by those individuals, right?
Mhm.
And it spawns more violence by their disciples, so to speak.
I was thinking of like where it says for their minds plot violence and their lips talk of trouble.
Mhm.
Like, I'm really curious. I don't have a way to look that up, like what the word is, but that makes me think about like some of these types of leaders in the world where they're really plotting something more violent against humanity and their lips are talking about trouble. Makes me think about like, like the fear mongering like, be afraid of this, but we're really going to destroy you anyway. We really want to own you and kind of, and that's a violence of sorts,
Yeah,
like the
interesting.
kind of slavery or enslavement they are looking to have.
Interesting gradient to think about, like Kim Jong-il. He has a lot of people doing his will because they fear him.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I think would be the really scary ones would be the ones that, you know, they might fear him, but they want to emulate him. They
Mm-hmm.
want to outdo him, or they want to make him so proud and happy. So there are different attitudes that one can take when looking at that. You know, it's okay because it crosses a line when you talk about when you define it as envious.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting idea, I think.
Yeah, I think that, we're talking mostly about people on the ends of the bell curve,
Yeah.
the ultimate evil. But
Mhm.
how many of us really envy those people and want to be around them? I mean, we can see their evil pretty clearly.
Mhm.
I can envy some of what they've got, the wealth or the power or access to resources, whatever it is. But I don't really want to be around those people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more mundane kind of evil that we live with all the time. People who just don't have good scruples, or who manipulate people, or whatever their thing is. I mean, everybody's got an evil inclination. Everybody does things wrong, has their
Right.
pet sins or whatever. But this is more about people who kind of tip the scale a little bit towards the wrong side, and not necessarily people who are going all the way over to the dark side. This isn't Darth Vader necessarily.
Yeah.
Um,
But what you're talking about is much more around like character that
Mhm.
has been so impacted by their choices that maybe in some circles their behavior seems okay,
Mhm.
but really because the scales have tipped, because the character has developed a certain way, there's a pattern of evil behavior that essentially classifies them now as an evil person.
Yeah, you think about somebody who is, maybe they're healthy, fit, they've got money, they've got lots of respect, maybe they're a minor celebrity or something, and they're not doing anything overtly evil, except that they tend to promote causes that undermine, biblical morality, or
Yeah.
they promote some kind of fringe religious ideas that will tend to lead people astray. And they're cool with Jesus, but is he the Messiah? Well, he was a good teacher, that kind of thing. On the whole, that person is evil by God's standards. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what other good that they do in the world. At heart, they're an evil person. And I want to read some of Psalm 73 here. I think it's really relevant to this verse. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's 28 verses long. But Asaph says, "Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They are not plagued by human evils or human ills." And then a little bit further down, "From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance, they threaten oppression. Their mouths, they lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore, their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance." And this is talking about somebody who's charismatic, who seems to have a lot to offer the world, but everything that they say is poisoned by this pride that they know better than God. And he says, "This is what the wicked are like, always free of care. They go on amassing wealth." And he says, "Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I have been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments." And I think this is the real danger of being around those kind of people who are subtly wicked, because when you're around them and you befriend them, you start to think, well, their motives are good. They're trying to do the right thing. Maybe what they're doing isn't so bad. And look at all the benefits it brings. And it slowly erodes your own faith in your own sense of morals.
Mhm.
And what Asaph comes to later on, this is kind of like this is like Ecclesiastes in a single chapter. Trying to find the spot. I can't find the one verse I was looking for. Oh, here it is. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply till I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their final destiny. Surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. And his point there is that wicked people who don't appear to be so wicked, who generate a lot of goodwill in the people around them, they seem to be doing really well right up until the moment when they're not. And that moment could be, in this world where suddenly they're revealed to be a really horrible person and somebody hacks their email and exposes them to the world, or it's after they die and they have to face the final judgment. At some point, everything that they thought that they built is going to be taken away. And Asaph says that, everything that I value is in heaven. So once he finally got that straightened out, he was no longer tempted to buy all of the good things that these people appeared to have, because he just no longer valued that.
Yeah.
He had a higher perspective.
Yeah. As you were talking about that and reading that, it made me think about like conversations I've had in the past. And I guess not like out of like envy, but just out of like contrast, I guess, looking at people who like don't have any standards that they're kind of trying to uphold, right? That, let's say in business or in their lives, they're doing well because they never have to worry about boundaries. They never have to concern themselves with boundaries. And I know I've talked about that in the past in some ways of like, yeah, if I didn't care about X, Y, or Z, I could do all these things, right? But because I care about people and about harming people and about oppressing people and all these different things, then because I'm trying to uphold God's standards, then there are things that I can't do. There are things that go outside of the boundaries of what I'm able to do and please God. And we probably see a lot more of that in everyday life when we come across people who are unscrupulous. It's tempting to think that like, oh, it's easy for them because they don't have any boundaries.
I think that all the time when it comes to marketing and advertisers. Do
yeah,
these people
and there are a lot of
actually
people
have
who
any
don't
moral?
have, yeah.
I mean, you can take that on I want to make a lot of money. That's my priority. And there are honorable and righteous ways of doing it. There are dishonest ways of doing it. I mean, dishonest would be by theft, right? Dishonorable would be, I'm going to start a strip club, or I'm going to do a porno shop, or, I'm going to find that market that I think would be the prurient and bring in money regardless of morality. So yeah, once you start to apply a standard to yourself, it's what are you willing to do or not do? Because you can make a heck of a lot of money if you chose some of those not righteous ways.
Yeah.
At least I would think you could. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
you can
remember
lobby Congress to get certain ingredients in your food approved for not being listed in the ingredients.
even though it kills people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think about like years ago when my cousin, who was in a very vulnerable situation, needed a car. and she bought this car from a used car place, and they charged her the maximum legally allowed interest rate, which was outrageous. I think it was like 25%, which is just insanity. And so it was legal, but is it righteous to like prey on people who are desperate? Those kinds of things in the behavior of a person or a business to be taking advantage of people who are vulnerable, that would certainly be something I would consider evil. And even though it was legal, it was still like practicing that on an ongoing basis. That's pretty rotten. I mean, it, because if you can do it and you can do business for less, which I know that there were plenty of car salesmen who were doing it for less, it's like, wouldn't you do that? You know, and then they would also argue, I'm sure on the other side of that argument would be, well, these people really need it, and this is the way that we provide this for them, and we're doing something good for them. And it's like, maybe.
Well, there's a whole industry, the gap industry.
The what?
Purposes, the gap insurance industry.
Yeah, yeah.
The gap insurance is to cover people that are upside down. And why are they upside down? Because they take a loan out that's more than the vehicle.
Yep,
So.
exactly. Yeah. And in some ways you would think that that helps people, but in a lot of ways, when you look at the end result, oftentimes it's a worse situation for them. You know?
Well, that slides into verse 3 very well. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. So it does sort of scream buyer beware in that situation. You gain wisdom and understand the ramifications of what you commit to or don't commit to, you know?
Since we're on verses 3 and 4, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. On the, what's the right word? On the surface level, this really is true that, you know, you're talking about a house. I mean, of course, I mean, even on the surface level, it's not talking about a physical structure, but, you know, your house, your household. Building a household around foolish ideas. And I know I talked to a guy recently who you can't say that he married his high school sweetheart because she wasn't really a sweetheart, and neither was he. They were both hooligans, and they got married because it was the thing that people were doing. And, you know, they went on living as they had lived before they got married. So they started with foolishness, you know, carried on with foolishness, and ended up divorced after not too many years. If you're going to have a lasting household, then, you know, especially one that's going to carry on for generations, then it has to begin with wisdom and build that over time. But on another level, this is about more than just your own family, your household, but about every enterprise that you build, about business and ministry and communities and friendships and everything else. Everything will be stronger if it's founded in wisdom. And what is the only real source of wisdom? That's God and his instructions. This second part, by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Let me pull up another passage in my other window and bring it over. Matthew 13, verse 52. And Yeshua said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven, or who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. And the teacher of the law is, I mean, he's talking about a righteous teacher of the law, not like the Pharisees and Sadducees who were teaching incorrectly. But, you know, not all the Pharisees were bad guys. Nicodemus and Paul were both Pharisees. And of course, Paul was a bad guy when he started, but many of them were honest, good teachers of the law, and they were teaching God's commandments over men's. And that's what Yeshua is talking about here. In this person who is, bringing out these treasures, old and new. The purpose of the treasures that you acquire through wisdom are to be shared. If you're not sharing them, then they're probably not really wisdom. But it doesn't mean that you share them with everybody, because everybody can't receive them, which is why Jesus frequently spoke in parables. And then, it says right after that, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. And he taught people in parables because many of them weren't going to accept what he had to say. So he said things in a way that only those who were ready for them would hear, the people who were actually looking for real wisdom. And so, the treasures that you're filling your house with are these things that you accumulate over time that add to the wisdom and the prosperity of whatever it is that you're building. And the whole point of them is to bring them out again, share them with other people who can appreciate. And I know I kind of took that a long ways from where it sounds like it's supposed to go, but I think it's still relevant to the text.
Yeshua came and taught the Torah when he was on earth to the people because they were swarmed by the Pharisees' teachings and by all the defense laws that they were teaching. But this connects to the Torah here, this verse right here, actually to Genesis. I think there's a teaching, a Jewish teaching on a house, what a house means. And anyway, did you know that in the first word of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says Bereshit, bara, and then, it goes on. But it says the word Bereshit. The first letter in the word Bereshit is a bait. And a bait is a house. So it begins in the house of God. So wisdom begins in the house of God and is built here in God with the Torah. And by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious. The Torah is full of precious and pleasant riches. So I think this could be referring to the Torah as well.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it definitely is, because that is the source. I mean, that's the written record of God instructing his people in wisdom.
Yes.
And when in this very verse, when Jesus talks about, bringing treasures out of the storerooms, he's talking about a teacher of the law. So these treasures are the individual precepts and mitzvah commandments of God. Throwing around a lot of Hebrew words tonight. If there's a word that anybody doesn't recognize, just feel free to speak up, or you can put it in the chat if you want.
Sure.
Some of those, like mitzvah is a good deed or fulfilling a commandment. Go ahead, Scott.
A wise man is full of strength. That's an interesting idea. It suggests that wisdom requires a commitment. There's an element of wisdom that requires something of you, an action. It's not just wisdom for wisdom's sake. Are you willing to stand by that belief and live by that belief? So it's not just head knowledge, it's engaging it.
Yeah, and along that same idea is that, no kind of strength comes from just sitting on your butt. If you're going to build strength, it means you have to exercise it, you have to use it. And that's true of wisdom and knowledge too. You can't get a little bit of wisdom or a little bit of knowledge and then think that's enough, because it's never enough. And you're going to lose that wisdom if you don't put it to use.
That's a good point.
I had a friend that she was or is a world-class painter in watercolors. acrylics, I guess. And she was a whiz in college. And when she graduated, she wanted to present a lot of her work at galleries and so forth. And a person that she gave a lot of credence to told her, yeah, you're okay. Come back when you're 30 or 40, when you've got some life experience. So wisdom is sort of the gaining of experience and not just book knowledge. It's, I've lived it. I've experienced it. I have a 3D experience, and I can fall back upon that experience. I'm certainly have a lot more wisdom now just because I've had more life experience. And I'm not saying I'm wise. I'm just saying I've had experience, so I can lean into that experience and try to parse out what is good and what's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're gaining more wisdom through experience every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, you'll gain some wisdom and knowledge through routine, easy experience, but it's really the variety and the difficult things that brings the most wisdom. The harder the trials that you go through, the more wisdom you accumulate through them, if you're willing to learn from them. You can go through a trial and rail against it and blame God for everything bad that happens, and that's going to limit the amount of wisdom that you're going to gain through it. But if you recognize it as something that God is allowing you to go through because there is a purpose, even if you don't know what the purpose is, you're more likely to learn from it and get whatever it is that God is wanting you to get out of it. Wisdom is gained through trials and study over time. And well, look at this in the next couple of verses, verse 7. Yeah, I guess verse 7 here. Wisdom is too high for a fool. In the gate, he does not open his mouth. The gate is talking about the city, essentially the city council and the city courthouse. In ancient Israel, if you had a question for the city elders, you would go to the gate because that's where they were sitting holding court. If you wanted to sue somebody, if somebody had wronged you and you wanted to find redress, you would go to the city gates and appeal to the elders there. That's where the evidence would be supplied. That's where judgment would be passed. And verse 7 here is saying that wisdom is too high for a fool. The city gates are a good place to learn wisdom by listening silently, but not by trial and error. The place to learn the kind of wisdom that enables you to sit at the gates in judgment of other people and being an elder of the community, that kind of wisdom is found out in the world doing things. And by the world, I don't necessarily mean doing worldly things. I mean just interacting with people and accomplishing things, going through trials. You're never going to find sufficient wisdom by sitting at the gates and listening. You get it somewhere else, and then you bring it back to the gates. Although, you'll definitely get wisdom by sitting and listening. And if you don't have that wisdom and you try to open your mouth, hopefully the people who do have the wisdom will know enough to shut you up.
Why do doctors practice so long before they enter the field, right?
They practice so that they can go into practice.
Yeah, they have to have that experience. There's a reason why they work so hard as an intern and so forth. It's so they're just not doing book knowledge.
Yeah, I'm far from a doctor, but I do a lot of troubleshooting of sick things, sick computers though, not sick people. And it's been a long time since I've done like desktop computer support. People don't call me and say, hey, I've got this problem on my computer. Will you help me with it? They don't do a whole lot of that anymore. That's really the help desk. And I handle things that are a step removed from that. So the IT people come to me with problems and say, I've got customers who have this problem. Can you help with that? But the reason that they can come to me and ask those questions is because I spent a couple of decades doing desktop support.
Right.
And I've seen, even though the operating systems on the computers that I used, Windows XP was still my favorite operating system. But, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 2000, 98, 95, all of those, nobody's using those anymore. But because I spent so much time, seeing the problems that can happen on a computer, and then, knowing the kinds of things that cause those problems and the kinds of things that solve them, even if I don't know the operating system that you are using on your computer, I can have a pretty good idea of what is causing the problem and how to point you in the right direction. So if you're an IT person coming to me and saying, my customer has this problem, where should I look for the solution? I can say, oh, somewhere on this computer, there's this kind of tool. You're going to need to look for that. Something on that computer is connecting out to this server, sending this kind of data, and something is blocking it. And I don't know what that is, but because I recognize the patterns that I've learned, over decades of doing this kind of work, I can help people who are getting their hands dirty. And with medicine and health, it's the same kind of thing. Somebody spends so much time getting their hands dirty that at some point they take a step back and they've got all the nurses and the physician's assistants and all these other people doing, the day-to-day work with the patients, maybe, and they're in more of a consulting role. And I don't know if everybody can relate to that same kind of idea, but.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. We can't really hit all of them. If there is.
Can you hit the last one? At the very least, a little sleep and a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber,
mm-hmm.
and want like an armed man. I find that to be, I try to live in that fashion, but it doesn't take much to take you out of that or to slide you into poverty. It's
mm-hmm.
pretty amazing. It says a little slumber, a little sleep, a little full. It just take your eye off the ball for a little bit, and you're talking poverty. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, you spend your whole life building habits of doing the right thing. You take a couple of weeks off, and sometimes you just have to start over again and rebuild those same habits.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this isn't necessarily talking about that, because it's talking about somebody who has already developed a habit of not working. But it always starts with one choice not to do what you need to do. And
right.
A little break becomes a day off, and then the day off becomes a vacation, and then an extended vacation, and then it's the middle of summer and you got weeds growing in your fields, and
Mm-hmm.
too late to plant anything now because it's too hot.
Yeah, I was thinking in an agrarian society, this would have been like, it doesn't take much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It doesn't take much to get completely off of the cycle when you have you have a growing season that has a few different cycles, a few different harvests. You could really end up in a bad situation very quickly.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about verse 10 here. And if there is a particular proverb that anybody wants to talk about, feel free to speak up, put it in the chat or something. This actually kind of ties into a little sleep, a little slumber, in a way, because there are, in everybody's life, there are going to be good times and bad times, easy times and hard times. And the verse says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small, which sounds kind of harsh. It's like, well, it's the day of adversity. That's when you would expect people to faint or to not be as strong, or to give up somehow. The problem is that the day of adversity means that there was a day of not adversity. And what did you do on that day when you were not under strain? Those are the times when you have to put yourself under strain. You have to seek out challenges. And You don't have to seek out the hardest challenge, but you seek out things that are going to help you grow, that are going to push you a little bit further when it's safe, when you don't have to do it. Do it then so that you can grow strength. So when you have to do it, you are able to.
That sounds like discipline.
It is
I
self-discipline.
know. I know. Yep.
Yeah. So God doesn't give us peaceful times as a vacation. He gives them as an opportunity to seek out challenges to build strength and capacity that we're going to need when those days of adversity come.
Yeah, he gives us the Sabbath for that break.
Yeah. And even that is a day for building a different kind of
Yeah,
strength.
a different kind of discipline. Yeah.
So, we've talked before about how, well, we've talked about it frequently, how dark the world is becoming and how anti-God and anti-Christian the world is right now. And it seems to be getting worse. I mean, there are bright spots here and there. There are some people who are making big strides towards forcing the world to confront truth instead of everybody agreeing to a lie. But overall, the trend is pretty negative. And that generally means that persecution is coming. Persecution has been pretty rare in the United States, but it happens everywhere eventually. It's not like they say about natural disasters. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It does happen. So we've had it really easy in the United States. And this is the time when we should be building up our faith, continually pushing forward in, learning greater obedience, studying God's word. I mean, while we've got the written word, but if someday we're not allowed to have it, like in some countries. And it's a challenge to figure out how to do that. When your life is easy, I've had hard times, but I've never had Auschwitz hard times. I've never had, the siege of Leningrad kind of things. I've never had a life like people have in North Korea. Compared to them, my entire life has been a vacation. So in that kind of world, what does it really mean to push yourself and to prepare for those days of adversity? I honestly don't know. I mean, prayer, study, make sure we're getting together with our community and doing good for each other. But should we deliberately put ourselves into, should we starve ourselves for a couple of months on severely restricted calories to know what it's like to be starving someday? I don't know. That seems kind of extreme. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Nothing wrong with fasting.
Nope.
There's good reasons to fast. There's lots of good reasons to fast, not just health reasons.
Mhm.
And you don't have to do it to make sure that you can withstand starving. But it is something that is kind of a byproduct of it, is that you have more tolerance for something, and it does build certain disciplines. So my suspicion is that there's probably a lot of things you could do that have plenty of positive side effects that would prepare you for things.
I would like to second that, Paula. I have to say I have not had a I mean I've not had an easy life, shall we say, but I have chosen a lot of disciplines during the relatively easier times to build that muscle of discipline and being able to withstand tough things. And a really funny example that's happened over the last month is that we have not had a hot water heater, and I have been doing cold plunges for, I don't know, like 8-10 years now, and taking cold showers forever. It feels like at least over the last like 5 or 6 years, because I'm kind of a biohacker. And my husband, who used to be, he was a Marine at one point and had obviously did a lot of tough things back then. And what really struck me as hilarious is when our hot water heater went out about a month ago, he took one cold shower and decided he couldn't handle it, and subsequently used the neighbors and then eventually joined a gym just so that he could have a shower, a hot shower. And it struck me as like almost scary that he couldn't, we knew the water heater was going to take like at least 3 weeks, but that he couldn't just suck it up for 3 weeks. And I thought to myself, wow, like that's really telling. And I don't mean to call him out, so I'm
Right,
he's a great
right.
husband, but it's just an example. And like the same thing with fasting. Like I have been fasting for 8-9 years now, and I do it daily. I do it in short stretches and I do it in long stretches, and I've never done a 40-day fast, and I do plan to do that. But in fact, I have not even done half that yet, but I've done 20 days, and it's a super amazing challenge for mental strength, and really to not just prove that you can muscle your way through or willpower your way through, but to learn how to rely on God, because that is the purpose, is to break our fleshly will and our fleshly desires, and our to crucify that part of us that thinks that we need anything but God. And I think it's just a good practice for us to learn, because it does build a different kind of spiritual muscle. And I don't know what we're going to do when there's civil war and like deep famine. I don't know how that would translate to developing this, but it does give you a greater reliance on God, and I think that's really critical.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Wow. A 20-day fast. Yeah. I've
That's a
known
lot.
people who've done extended fasts, and I knew one guy who did 40 days. But yeah, that takes an extraordinary amount of discipline.
Yeah, but what I learned through, I more regularly do 7 or 14, but what I've learned is that it can also, it can build confidence, but the most important thing is to do it for a spiritual reason. Because one of the things I learned is that it made me feel kind of proud, and yes, you want to be proud, but like to a point of arrogance, to say, oh, I did this. And I think that was my mistake in that, is that it's meant, like, I'd rather do a short fast and take each time that I would regularly eat and just study the word and pray. Like, I'd rather have the reason that I'm doing it be to build the relationship with God, rather than prove something to myself that, oh, I've got this, muscle. I've done it both ways. And I think the way that we're designed to do it is to really make it all about the spiritual discipline, and so that we don't get that false sense of pride.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, I just wanted to weigh in. I'm sorry I've been out of
Good.
commission, but I just thought this is something that I can speak to, that it is helpful, I think, to put ourselves through tough things, because like, who knew that I wouldn't have a hot water heater at my house for a month and plus, and to see the difference between how my husband and I handled it was really interesting. So
Yeah, that reminds me of a time when we were like homesteading back years ago and didn't have running water and like all these different things, and none of that was very comfortable, but it really built things into me that, and because I don't practice a lot of those things now, like I talk about a lot how like I'm getting soft, and what are the things that I need to do to like not get soft. And so I think those are things that, again, that has to do with like what disciplines are useful. And obviously these scriptures are speaking to the idea of discipline, but also I'm connecting that to like wisdom and God's word, God's truth, and gaining that kind of wisdom and doing things that would give you that kind of wisdom. So I like that.
A great book that I actually want to go back and reread, but I read at the beginning of this year. It was really interesting. It was called The Spirit of the Disciplined. Wait, or was it The Discipline of the Spirit? The Spirit of the Disciplined. I'm sure I have it inside. But it was all about how it behooves us to look at how Jesus lived and the things that he abstained from and when he abstained from them, and also the things that he did that were like adding to his life, that, you know, times of celebration, times of service, things like that. And then the things that he didn't do, and not for the, I mean, just to understand why discipline helped him and what it did for him. And it was a really good book. So if anyone, oh God, I can't believe it. It's either The Spirit of the Discipline or The Discipline of the Spirit. One of those
I'm
two.
looking it up right now. I see a book.
Amazon.
Yeah, I see a book called The Spirit of the Disciplines.
That's it. That was it.
Yeah.
It was good. It was helpful to me because just looking at a model, Jesus being a model for like how we can sort of develop how he, you know, like using his life as a model, I think is a worthy model. We don't have anybody probably in our current culture that we would necessarily want to model ourselves after.
True. Yeah, along those same lines, a book that John Barron's recommended a couple of weeks ago, Everyday Holiness, not written by a Christian, I think it's written by a rabbi, but along the same kinds of lines, developing character using biblical principles. All right, is there another one that somebody else would like to go to before I go to one of my?
I like 27. Prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house. I like the idea of basically getting your environment ready before you bring in a dwelling place. That's sort of how I see it. It's, where is it you want to live? Where is it that you feel? I like the idea of feng shui. You folks familiar with feng shui?
Basically, yeah, the idea.
Vaguely.
Feng shui is it's a Japanese concept. I think it's Japanese, whereby you have flow. Your house has a certain flow that is life-giving, if you will. Well, I've lived in houses that are very cut up and they don't flow, if you will. And for me, spiritually, I don't like it. I don't like over confinement, or it does something to me spiritually. Well, when I read this, it's sort of along those lines. It's find where you thrive before you settle down, so to speak. And I appreciate that, because I've settled down before in places that I've not thrived, and it was not wise, and it was very disheartening. The first house I ever bought, I bought for the sake of buying a house. It was 25 by 25. I drove by it today just to go down memory lane, so to speak. And there was water in the basement. And I had a wife and 2 kids that lived in that house. And that was very, very small. And it made me appreciate better. Think things through before you start to lock yourself in, you know?
Yeah. And address the important things first.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things I've always, just reading this literally, is, you know, plant your fields before you build your house. I mean, everybody's heard, I think, of what is it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, you know, it's pretty common sense for the most part that, you know, things that we need to survive are the most important things in life. You've got to have water, then you've got to have food, then you've got to have shelter. Well, if you go and build a house, but you haven't even figured out what you're going to eat, you probably have your priorities mixed up.
Mhm.
You have to be able to provide for your family. And, most people start out with fairly modest home, and, you build yourself up over time as you can afford it. And that's the way it should be. When you have a small family, when you're young, when you don't have a lot of money, don't spend a ton of money on your house. And yeah, you should definitely plan ahead and make sure that it's adequate for your needs, that it's going to be a peaceful place to live. But if you can't even feed your family, you shouldn't be spending a lot of money on nice cars and a fancy house.
Yeah.
You should be spending your time building your income or finding a way to feed your family.
Mhm.
That reminded me of First Timothy 5:8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. But notice he doesn't say, well, I mean, providing for your relatives encompasses giving them shelter. In Torah, I'm trying to remember, I think there are 4 things that it says a man owes to his wife. He owes her food, clothing, children, and a home. And if he doesn't provide those, then he is neglecting his duties as a husband. And really, it's the same as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Focus on the ones that are most important. You can live in a small hut while you're building your income, but if you don't have something to eat, what's the point of building an income? Yeah, nothing else really to add to that,
No, it's good.
unless somebody else does. Verse 15 and 16 in this chapter, a lot of these they're not single line proverbs. And by the way, we got a thunderstorm coming in here, so if I get cut off, you'll know why. But a lot of these proverbs are 2 verses, and some of them are 3 or 4 even. In this one here, lie not in wait as a wicked man against the dwelling of the righteous. Do no violence to his home. The righteous falls 7 times and rises again. The wicked stumble in times of calamity. And I think this ties in well with what you were saying about a peaceful home, Scott. And maybe that's not immediately apparent, but when you look at the Hebrew words behind some of this, the word for the dwelling of the righteous, dwelling there is the word navah, and it's literally talking about the structure where a person lives. So don't lie in wait against the house of a righteous man. So don't try to take it from him. Don't try to tear it down, nothing like that. Leave his house alone. The second part, do no violence to his home. I think King James translates that as spoil not his resting place, which is probably a little more literal. The Hebrew word is, I have it written down here somewhere, rebetz, which literally refers to the place a person lies down, which could be his bed or his couch or his favorite recliner. And the idea is don't disturb the man's peace. You've heard the saying that, a man's home is his castle. Well, it's true for everybody who lives in that house. It's everybody's refuge. And this is warning you, don't plan to disrupt the peace of a person's home. This is the place where everybody needs to be able to go home and be protected from the world.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, family brings its own challenges. There are always conflicts in family, but they should not be the same conflicts that we have with the rest of the world. They should be the conflicts between people who love each other. Sometimes that's hard to tell, but that's the way it's supposed to be. And this passage saying, don't disturb that peace of that house. I'm guessing that Solomon wants to say that because that's the way that God wants it. God wants the home to be a refuge for the family and a place where you can go and be protected from the world. And if the world is trying to tear that down, we have so many people today trying to split up children from their parents and undermine their parents' authority. Not exactly what I was thinking about this. I was really thinking about people coming into your home and causing conflict. But how this relates to the next part, for the righteous falls 7 times and rises again. One of the reasons that the righteous can rise again is because he has peace in his home. And if you're going to disrupt that peace, you're disrupting the ability of people to recover from other problems. It's part of our spiritual immune system is to have a peaceful home.
Mhm.
Whereas the wicked who are disrupting homes, especially their own, when troubled times come, they're not going to have that support system to be able to hold them up and pick them up and carry on. That's all I got to say about that.
That's good insight.
There's always more I could say about just about anything,
Really,
but mostly I don't.
but mostly you don't. That's what I was gonna say.
While you're saying this, it comes to mind to me, the war on poverty
Hmm.
resulted in incentives. Unfortunately, it impacted the Black community, at least that's what I'm told, much more than the remaining of society, in that the incentives were for a single income family to be rewarded versus a whole family. Thus, fathers were encouraged to leave their families. Ultimately, in my mind, a very evil thing, but that was an attack on the home,
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
see
I agree. I think that was its whole purpose.
you see the results, and the results is that, from my understanding, that community had a very, very strong ideal of family before the war on poverty. And it's very sad to see the result of that, and like you said, probably planned. So that's what came to mind when you were talking about that to me.
Yeah, I think you're totally on track. And that's even worse than individual wicked people trying to disrupt one person's home. That's
Yeah.
wicked people with lots of power trying to disrupt everybody's home.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of one of Karl Marx's primary tools in using to implement socialism was the disruption of the family. And destroy the family, separate parents from children, and then you can essentially brainwash the children into accepting your ideas in spite of the reality that they can see around them. And we certainly
The
see a lot
nanny
of that
state.
today.
Yeah, the nanny state. It's let the
Mhm.
state be the dictator of what's moral,
Yeah,
what's
and
just.
teachers claiming that they know more than parents what's good for children, and even going so far as to claim that the children are theirs, not the parents.
Right.
And that is just evil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the next verse: do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and is displeased and turns away in anger.
Mhm.
I have an example that's not exactly on point, because my response would be, oh yeah, I should be happy when they fall, because they've been foiled, and therefore it's good for me that evil has been foiled. I mean, that seems to be a logical response. But if you go the 1,000-mile view, looking down, it's amazing God sees the enemy as still redeemable, as still worthy of humanity, if you will. So he's
Mhm.
always extending that branch of friendship, or hand of friendship. And as I said, this is not exactly on point, but it I think gets the gist of what I'm trying to say. I watched a show, I think it's called Northwood's Law. There are two different variants. One is Maine, the other is New Hampshire, but it's basically following the warden service as they go through their experience in those various states. And I watched one last week, and it was about some wardens in New Hampshire. And they were looking to solve a 20-year-old missing person case. And that 20-year-old missing person case, they were pretty sure, or they were theorizing that this individual left, I don't know, a bar, his house, whatever, I don't remember what it was, and was never seen from again. And they said, well, we think he drove into the Androscoggin River over this 30-mile stretch. And it piqued my interest because in Maine, the Androscoggin comes through Maine, and it's a river I'm familiar with and so forth. Well, they're doing their search, and they have boats going with the new sonar equipment. Long story short, they ultimately find the truck. They do find and put to bed this mystery, okay? And they wanted to do so to give the family closure. Now, this is where I'm sort of tying this in. You see the men looking for this truck, and they get excited when they find it. And they're laughing and they're joyful. And I get it. I get that response because that was the goal that they had before them. However, when you take a step back, and this is where I was talking about you're looking down 1,000 mile looking down, so to speak, their response is somewhat offensive because they're glad they found this dead person. I think God looks at this scenario in a similar way, and that is, we would be happy that the enemy has been foiled, but that foiling of the enemy, especially if they're killed or whatnot, has extinguished that hope for them. So that's my attempt to try and give that some context from an emotional standpoint. It's not on point exactly, but it gives you a feel for it, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, it's like in that scenario, it's good it's great that they found the vehicle. Now we know what happens. We can have closure. It's a good thing to rejoice when tyranny ends, when wickedness ceases. But, don't gloat. Don't be, don't party when your enemy is hurt or destroyed. Rejoice that you are no longer under oppression. That's great. But not that somebody else was hurt. It's a fine line, but when you start rejoicing on one, it's hard not to move into the next one. But there is a difference. There's a passage in Obadiah. I don't remember. I think, this is about Edom and Israel, or Edom and Judah, and how when Judah was down, Edom rejoiced over Judah's, ill fortune. And so God gives Obadiah this prophecy, and it says, you should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in the calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of trouble. The day of Yahweh is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. And that's a lot like what this proverb is saying. It says, don't rejoice when your enemy falls, lest Yahweh see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him. The implication is that God is turning his anger away from that guy and refocusing it on you. And now you're going to get what he got. Anybody had anything they wanted to add to that? Okay. Well, what about, what's another proverb in here that someone would like to talk about? There are lots of good ones. Like verse 24. Nobody does that. Saying to the wicked, you are in the right. Can't imagine anybody doing that. This is actually another one of those proverbs where what we see in reality doesn't necessarily match what the proverb says. Whoever says to the wicked, you are in the right, will be cursed by peoples, abhorred by nations. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and good blessings will come upon them. At least right now, we see exactly the opposite. in the world. You know, Bud Light putting a tranny on their can, celebrating erasing women from everything. It just blows my mind. How did they think this is a good thing? I don't understand any of it except that it is driven by a desire to fit in God's face. It's all about a hatred of God. And that's the only way any of it really makes sense. But, you know, it says that when you tell the wicked that they're in the right and you tell the righteous that they're wrong, that you're going to be cursed by people. But if you rebuke the wicked, you'll be loved. If you rebuke the wicked, you get canceled. You may end up being arrested, sued, or whatever. People are going to make your life miserable. And the only way I can mesh this with what we see in reality is to recognize that our society is very sick. It is not functioning as a society should. And if we were living in a righteous culture that was trying to honor God, this is what things would look like. But we don't.
Well, the ironic part of it is by identity politics or empowering somebody that identifies as the opposite sex, you're actually diminishing that opposite sex. When you have men competing because they identify as a woman, and then they win all of those contests, and this is just in sports, but you could take it in any application.
Mm-hmm.
You are now not letting women win. You're letting men basically win by claiming that they're a woman. They're saying, hey, I can't make it, I can't cut it in this gender. See if I can try in the opposite gender. And it just hurts the opposite gender, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's celebrate women by celebrating a man pretending to be a woman.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. And what's even worse is so many women go along with it. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, it's odd.
We do have a couple of women on the call here. Nothing to say about that?
Well, I mean, what can I say? You've said it all. I mean, there is.
So here I am erasing women.
No, I think it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like in this situation that we're in, it's like for women to speak up is that same thing that the Proverbs talking about. It's like, and part of it is because it doesn't even matter who speaks up. Men speak up about it, they get canceled. Women speak up, they get canceled. It's insanity. And it's because the force of what they're trying to accomplish, that this force that they're using to accomplish it is all that matters. Like, it's all about force. It's not about love at all. And I think that if it were about, I just want to be free to be who I am kind of thing, if that really was what it was about, then it would have to acknowledge that it has an effect on the women who are already are women, and we're not taking into consideration that these women are being harmed. We're just only concerned about this person who believes they're a woman or wants other people to believe they're a woman, and how they're being harmed by not being allowed to do this. And it's just insanity, because we all have choices in life. There are lots of circumstances that we come into where we're going to have, we're going to be put into a position where we're not going to like something. And if we go around trying to force everybody to like bend to our will,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to have good relationships. We're going to be, it's tyranny. And I think that's the unfortunate thing that's happening. And the complicitness of these corporations and stuff is just beyond me, because it really is like, it's an extension of the government's, involved, and the corporations now. And it's just a huge extension of that tyranny.
Yeah,
So
my
it's hard,
wife. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's hard to really speak to because it's really bigger than just like I'm a woman and I'm offended. I am, but it's just a lot bigger than that at this point. Because we're dealing
Yeah.
with spiritual forces. We're dealing with spiritual darkness.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too, Paula. I guess I'm not even offended because I'm so baffled. Like it's beyond me what's happening. So then I absolutely know this is the spiritual war that has to, like, it has to play out. Like I've come to peace with that. All of this has to happen. And it's like, there's nothing that can be done because the spiritual war has to have a stage, and this is the stage, and we're just unfortunately watching this stage. And I know it sounds weird, but I just like, you know what? I'm glad this is happening because it means Jesus is coming back. That's all I can figure is just, okay, keep playing out and it'll just speed up the rate at which Jesus comes back and we're moving on. That's all I can think at this point because I'm too baffled to be offended almost.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's done a lot on natural law. Natural law is basically reality, if you will. You know, there's certain things that are just truths. And that's really what Proverbs is speaking to as a whole. These are certain truths. And when you swerve into the discussions that we've just had, it's saying, no, we're not going to deal with truths. We're going to deal with perceptions. We're going to deal with what we say is truth. It's kind of funny because it goes hand in hand with the idea of virtual reality, right? Virtual reality is this make-believe world that we're participating in under an avatar or whatever. And it's kind of funny. It has the word virtual, or take virtue in there, which is just sort of a slap in the face, you know?
Yeah, virtue is supposed to be about truth.
So it's not. The Proverbs are, this is what life is, and that's what wisdom is. You know, we're trying to function in wisdom, and society is saying no. It's, I identify as X, Y, or Z, and and people are punished for that. You know, if you call something truth, which is not truth, you can lose your job in the state of Maine if you do that. I think there were people that were at a school identifying as fuzzies or something like that. They would go around in costumes, and they had cat litter boxes set up for them and things like that in the school. And there were some, I think it was a janitor, but my understanding is that there were people that would call them out. This is not right. And they were fired. So it's with a cudgel. It's you better help us live in our fantasy, or we're going to punish you.
It's the agenda.
Yep. Well, along those same, talking about truth and who is cursing and who is blessing whom. Verse 26, although it's kind of worded strangely, whoever gives an honest answer kisses the lips. And I think that the ESV got this one a little bit wrong. See, King James. I think this one is close. King James is closer, I think, to what the intended meaning is. But even this is kind of weird because King James adds some words that aren't in there. King James says, "Every man shall kiss his lips that giveth a right answer." And Solomon just got done saying that, the people who tell the wicked that they're right will be cursed, and the people who rebuke the wicked will be blessed. And then it says that men will kiss the lips of the one who tells the truth. It's not talking about literally kissing the lips, but it's talking about the lips because that's where the truth comes out. Truth and lies comes out of your mouth. in kissing the lips is a metaphor of saying, yes, this is a good thing. We're so glad you said this. And, giving praise to people for speaking correctly. And there's a passage that this reminded me of. There was a lot of different places in the Bible that these Proverbs reminded me of this time. This one is in Mark 12. And it's a conversation between Yeshua and a scribe, which frequently those don't go so well. But in this case, the scribe comes and asks him, who is the, I'm trying to find the right, I think I wrote down the wrong verse here. Okay, here it is. So this teacher comes to him and says, which is the most important commandment? And Jesus replies with, here's the most important one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, both of those are straight out of Torah. Those are direct quotes. The first one is from Deuteronomy. The second one is from Leviticus. And the man replies, well said, teacher. You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. First, just sort of a tangent, note that this is before the crucifixion, before the resurrection, and this is a scribe, a teacher of the law, saying, loving God and loving your neighbor is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. This isn't radical because this is what God told them in the prophets. It's always been the truth. God always wanted mercy
obedience
and love. Yeah, he
Right.
wanted obedience, which includes sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the heart of loving God and loving your neighbor that creates the obedience. It's not the
Well-
obedience in order to get favors from God. That's doing
Well,
it
and
backwards.
the obedience to God would make obsolete the need for the sacrifices.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
So the idea
great
of like
extent, that
he
is
wants
true.
our mercy and our he wants mercy and love. It's that stuff comes from loving him, which means obeying him. And then we wouldn't have this need for this stuff. So it's like he's
Yeah.
saying, I'd rather you have, from the beginning, obviously from Adam, I'd rather you have just obeyed me. I'd
Mhm.
rather you just always obey me than have to have you sacrifice anything, in terms of like ritual sacrifice. But obeying him naturally comes with a sacrifice of some sort. It is a sacrifice of something.
Yeah. And this is an uncomfortable thing for a scribe or a Pharisee, or especially a Sadducee, to say, because their entire religious system revolved around the ritual,
Around
doing the stuff. And
especially the temple.
why you did it was secondary to what you did. Whereas Yeshua
Yep.
was telling them it was the other way around.
Yep.
Why you're doing it is more important than actually what you're doing. I mean, as long as you're not murdering people or, outright hurting people. But, if your heart is right, you're not going to be doing those things. If you are loving God and loving your neighbor, you're not going to be committing murder or adultery or stealing. So the why is more important in that sense. But because this guy was willing to say this truth that so many of his peers would have steered away from, even though they knew it was true. Can you imagine you are having a conversation with the Messiah, Son of God,
Mhm.
and he says, well said. That was a good answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what Jesus said to him in reply. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And from then, no one dared ask him any more questions. And this was that kiss to the lips of the truth speaker.
Mhm.
Yeshua giving this, it doesn't sound like huge praise, but for the Son of God, the King, to say, you're not far from the kingdom, that's pretty high praise.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some good perspective.